So I'm here with Mark. Sorry, while we're recording, we can cut this out. But Mark, how do I pronounce your last name?
Boulet.
Boulet. Okay,
Yes.
I thought it would have been that, but I just wasn't sure. Okay. All right. So I'm here with Mark Boulet from BehaviourWorks. Mark, thanks for coming on. Would you like to introduce yourself or have a chat about what you do over at BehaviourWorks?
Sure. So Mark Boulet, I'm a research fellow at BehaviourWorks Australia. We're part of the Monash University Sustainable Development Institute. We're a team of about 15 to 20 people who are interested in behavioral science, and particularly the application of behavioral science to sustainability challenges, whether they're environmental sustainability or social sustainability issues. And one of the things that I do as part of my work is, I guess, I'm interested in the application of behavioral thinking to the challenge of food waste and how we can use that to try and reduce the amount of food waste that we're producing, particularly from households.
Right. All very exciting and interesting. How did you end up wanting to apply your knowledge of behavior in that area to food waste?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, look, I've got an undergraduate, in zoology back in the dim dark ages. And when I finished my undergrad and I did my honors, I realized that, if we don't do something about the underlying issues that are challenging, I guess, our natural environment, with regards to energy consumption, water consumption, waste production, all those sort of things, and there's not going to be much zoology left to study. So I shifted my focus, I guess. I still love, I guess, natural environments and ecosystems and those sort of things, but I was much more interested in doing something about the underlying threats to those particular things. Right. And so moved over to, I guess, a focus more on how do we engage people in this sort of stuff. So that sort of led me to behavioral science and food waste. I did a couple of projects as part of contract research for a group over in Western Australia and also EPA New South Wales. And I just became more interested in the topic as a result.
Right. So, yeah, I guess the desire to take action so that you could save the field that you initially started in.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And look, I mean, I don't know how many zoologists are going to be watching this, but it's a pretty crowded field, and a lot of my peers were heading off into labs and doing environmental management consultant, and I wasn't really into that sort of stuff. So I also wanted to switch up a little bit.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad, and I'm sure all the viewers are glad that we have someone like yourself leading the charge against food waste. A food fighter, I believe, is what Bernardo calls us.
Yeah, right. Nice.
So just back to BehaviourWorks. So it's all about the application of people's behaviors. And I guess we could say it's you guys are figuring out why we waste.
Yeah, I mean, look, my colleagues apply behavior research methods to a range of sustainability issues. I specifically am interested in food waste. There are other colleagues that look at broader issues to do with resource consumption, whether it's recycling effectiveness or choice of sustainable products and those sort of things. And I've kind of narrowed in a little bit more to look at, I guess, waste, but particularly I'm more interested in how do you avoid food waste, right? So I'm less interested in in getting more people to use compost bins or worm farms. And I don't have anything against them. They're an important thing, but I'm interested in how do we avoid getting to the point where we have a pile of food, leftover ingredients, something at the back of the fridge that we need to end up putting in a compost bin. So how do we avoid getting to the point where food is being wasted rather than deciding, we'll put it in the recycling bin, or do we put it into the rubbish bin?
Okay. Yeah. And that's all so important looking at these behaviors, because food waste is most common in the household.
Yeah. So look, I mean, and I'm sure you would have already heard some of the broader issues to do with food waste, and also some of the broader, I guess, trends and figures to do with food waste when you spoke with Annika Stott from Oz Harvest. But just quickly, at a global level, 1.3 3 billion tons of food is lost or wasted every year. That's from the farmer all the way through to the householder. Yeah, so across the entire food system.
Yeah.
In Australia, it's about 7.6 million tons that we waste overall. But both in Australia as well as in the majority of countries for which there is good data, the consumption phase, so that's food waste from restaurants, supermarkets, other food services, and households, is the largest one of the largest proportions of that food waste. And households in particular make up a significant amount of the food that we waste. So it's an area that, you know, is worthy of, I guess, attention, just because of the sheer amount of food waste that emerges from it.
Right. Absolutely. And this is a massive question, but if you could pin it down to one thing, what exactly is driving the food waste within the household?
It is a massive question.
Yeah, and I understand it might be hard.
You know, you should never ask a researcher what's the one thing. I'm going to give you at least 36 things. Look, it's one of those tricky things. So we do know that household food waste has a significant behavioral component to it, right? So it's how we shop, it's how we cook, it's how we eat, it's how we plan for shopping. Those behaviors do have, result in food being wasted or not, right? But there are other things that are out of our control when it comes to household food waste, right? So, you know, if the supermarkets only offer, 1 kilo packets of lettuce and you're a one-person household, food waste is going to be locked in for you regardless of what you do, right? So there are some underlying contextual variables which are a bit out of our control, which lead to food waste. And then there are other things, like, say, the type of food. So fresh vegetables and fruits tend to rot and spoil a lot more quickly than, say, a can of beans. So again, based on what we buy, there's some things that are going to then result in food being wasted. So I certainly don't focus on households and behavior saying that is the only thing that results in food waste. I'm very conscious of there are other contextual things that lead to food being wasted in the household. I'm interested, I guess, in behavior because there's a lot of us, right? And food waste, we engage with food in a really habituated and unthinking manner, which tends to mean that we buy more than we need, we cook more than we need, and we don't use leftovers as well as we should be. So I see there's a huge opportunity then from behavior as being a big driver of food waste in households, even though it's not the only driver. Okay.
Yeah. So we have the context of how we're buying our food, the storage, whether you've got 5 people in the house or you're just a single person in the house. And then we have the actual behaviors surrounding the food waste itself.
Exactly.
So then I guess I'd love to focus on the behaviors themselves and some of the attitudes. You mentioned that we have a very habitual attitude towards food, as in we buy it, we cook it, we throw it out. We throw out what we don't need. And Bernardo brought up a really interesting point about how he'd love to change behaviors surrounding food and make it more of a connection and build a relationship with food. Mm-hmm. Have you looked into that at all?
I haven't, no, not so much with regards to that. Look, I mean, I guess, one of the reasons that, we engage with food every day, okay? And things that we tend to do every day at home tend to become habits really quickly. Yeah. So, think about when do you last remember, when you brushed your teeth, or when did you last remember, drinking a glass of water or having a coffee first thing in the morning? Those behaviors, we do them so frequently, right, that we don't even think about them. And it's the same with food related behaviors. We tend to shop in the same places, we walk the aisles in the same pattern, we grab the same food, we grab the same amounts of the same particular products, we cook the same meals, right? So there's a lot of unthinking stuff that comes from behavior. I think that there is something there about drawing more, I guess, deliberate awareness and attention to the way that we behave around food. But I don't fool myself in thinking that we have the bandwidth as humans to pay conscious attention to every single action to do with food every day. What I'm interested, I guess, is breaking bad behaviors and breaking bad habits around food and forming good habits around food that lead to less food being wasted.
Okay, so you're looking to, correct me if I'm wrong, of course, but you're looking to change those current habits that we don't even think about surrounding food into good habits, which we still don't think about, but are far more beneficial to fighting food waste and reducing our food waste.
Exactly. And I guess there's a bit of confusion often between behavior and habit, right? So a behavior is an action that you can see somebody doing, and a habit, right, is a behavior that we do unthinkingly in a really stable environment. Okay. So some behaviors are habitual, other behaviors are not. Yeah. So I guess it's just some technical differences to the way that I guess a behavioral scientist will view these sort of things. And I'll try not to bore you too shitless with these really, defined ways of looking at this sort of stuff.
I find that really interesting. I'm not going to lie.
But I mean, I guess what I'm interested in is, how do you change behaviors from those that waste a lot of food to those that reduce food waste?
Yeah.
And how do you make those good behaviors more habituated, right? That they're the things that we do unthinkingly rather than doing the bad behaviors unthinkingly.
Okay, right on. So that's pretty exciting. And when you break it down like that, it does sound like it's very straightforward solution to a math problem. I'm sure you're aware, you especially having researched it, it's not that simple. So I would love to know, what is the approach to changing people's behaviors?
Yeah. So this relates back to some work that I'm just in the process of finishing up with OzHarvest, and a lot of the research that I've been doing in the last few months has really been in partnership with OzHarvest to try and I guess inform their newly launched Use It Up campaign, right? And that was launched last week on Tuesday or Wednesday. And OzHarvest were interested in taking a behaviorally informed approach to their campaign. And essentially there's three main steps that we talk about when it comes to changing behavior, right? The first one is to actually identify what is the behavior that you want people to do. Yeah. Because we often know that we want people to waste less food, but wasting food is not a behavior, right? Wasting food is an outcome of a whole bunch of behaviors that we engage with, right? Yeah. All the way back into the supermarket, right? So the act of disposing food into a bin, right? That's kind of the final step of a long chain of things that we do that have brought us to that space. So it's how we shop, it's how we cook and how we eat that lead to food being wasted. So the first thing that we did with OzHarvest is actually identify what are all the different things that people can do to reduce food waste. And we ran a number of shops with experts, and we also surveyed experts to identify a list of 36 different behaviors that consumers can do that will reduce food waste or household food waste. I'm not going to bore you with all 36. You know, if people want to know what those 36 were, really detailed. But those behaviors cut across, I guess, 4 or 5 different categories. 1 is how we plan for shopping. 2 is how we shop. 3 is how we store food. 4 is how we cook food. And 5 is how we eat food, right? All those kind of broad practices have got very specific behaviors that sit underneath them. So that was the first thing that we did, is identify what can you actually do, rather than just vaguely talk to people about, hey, you need to reduce food waste. But often people don't quite know what they need to do,
Mm-hmm. Okay,
so you had a question?
No, I was just in the process of listening there and soaking it all up. So we have these 5 categories of 5 categories where you guys, that's BehaviourWorks and OzHarvest, have identified 36 behaviors that people can change, and people can go and check that out.
Categories, that's right, exactly.
Right. Okay. So I guess of those 5 categories, and if it can't be narrowed down, don't be afraid to say so. But of those 5 categories, where did you see the most, I guess, accessible change to behaviors that people? Where would you start?
That's really the next step, I guess, of taking a behavioral approach to a particular problem like food waste, because it's all very well to identify what people can do, but you do want to kind of go to the ones that you know are going to have potentially the greatest impact.
Absolutely.
That not many people are doing, right?
Yeah.
And also that ideally ones that are pretty easy to take up, because the easier they are to take up, the more people then hopefully will actually engage with them. So we did some prioritization of behaviors based on their impact, how easy they are, and also how many people are currently doing them. And we identified 3 based on relatively high impact, but also ones that not many people were doing, right? And the first of those was once a week that you make a meal that combines any food that needs using up in your house, right? And that's both leftover meals as well as, say, leftover ingredients. So, the last couple of bits of carrots, the onion that you've got, the little bit of yogurt you've got left over. A meal that tries to combine as many of those ingredients as possible that need using up before you go shopping and then buy those ingredients again, right? So that's the first one. The second behavior was, and it really was to support the first behavior, is in your pantry or in your fridge, have a shelf that is for those items that need to be used up. Because often in our pantries, in our fridges, leftovers and leftover ingredients tend to get pushed to the back, or to the bottom of the crisper, right? And then 3 months later, we kind of lift up all this stuff and there's this nice little sludge at the bottom. So what we're saying is, well, actually have in your pantry or in your fridge a little section where you move those items so that they're front of mind for you, right? So the next time you open the fridge, you go, oh yeah, I've got those carrots I need using up, or I've got, that half a jar of whatever that still needs using up, pasta sauce. Right? And the third behavior, so those 2 behaviors are related, first 2, around use it up, right? And they really form the basis of the Oz Harvest Use It Up campaign that came out of this research. The third behavior is more about the amount of food that we cook. So as I said to you, often we tend to just cook by habit, and the amounts we cook are by habit as well, right? We've always cooked for 4 people. So every meal we cook for 4 people, regardless of how many people are actually going to be in the home. So the behavior that we suggested is, before you cook a meal, check who's home, and then cook to the people that you know are going to eat, rather than just cook the normal amounts that you normally do. Because we all like to think that we will use leftovers, but the reality is we don't, right? They become pushed to the back of the fridge. So it is much more impactful to cook to who's home rather than just to cook normal amounts and have leftovers. So those are the top 3 behaviors that we recommended.
Okay, so just for our viewers, we'll do a quick recap. So the first one was once a week to cook something using the ingredients and leftovers that have been sitting in the fridge, or I guess I'm trying not to say leftover too many times, but you use up your leftovers to make a meal once a week.
That's right. And leftovers are not just necessarily leftover meals, but they're also ingredients that are left over, right? So once a week, make a meal that combines any food that needs using up in your fridge or pantry.
Okay, right on.
That's the first one.
That's the first one. And then the second one, which relates, they kind of come hand in hand, is to use or put all of those ingredients and leftover meals in a certain section or at the front of your fridge or pantry where you're going to see it and you're going to say, oh, I need to use that up.
Exactly right. Yep, spot on.
Right. And then the third one was to cook for the amount of people who are home, and to stop and think before you cook and actually go, okay, everyone's home, I'll do a 4-person meal, or it's just myself tonight, just one person.
Exactly. So before cooking, check who's home, right? And that could be, if for example, you're in a traditional family, right? That could be mum or dad just checking with their kids, particularly if they're teenagers, you're going to be home, right? If you live with housemates, it's a quick blast to your housemates on a WhatsApp text, right? Is anyone home tonight? I'm cooking, right? Or I'm about to cook. Who's going to be, just so you can actually cook to who's there rather than cook to who you assume will be there.
Right. Okay. And that's the 3. The 3 behaviors that people can start to implement into their fight against food waste to help reduce their food waste. And these are behaviors that are going to have a pretty high impact, but are also not being utilized by people as much as they could be.
Exactly right. Yep.
Right. Okay. So, well, that's pretty exciting for everyone listening, that they can go home and try a few of those things starting now, really, which is very exciting. And that we've sort of jumped around with the question order here, but I think it's great, the information we're getting. I'd love to ask you though, do you think that the massive amounts of food that we're wasting is due to a general lack of awareness of the impacts of food waste?
No.
Okay.
I think look, when I talk to people about food waste, right, in just day to day or in my research, right, they all tell me it's a bad thing, right? There's very few people that are going to sit there and tell me, oh no, I think food waste is fine, it's not a problem, it doesn't waste money, it doesn't have environmental impacts, right? We all have heard, eat your food because there's, starving children in XYZ that don't get it. We all are really aware, very sensitive to the economic, moral, social, and environmental implications of food waste, right? We know that happens, and we know it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
What we don't know is how much food we actually waste, right? A lot of people think that they waste a lot less than they actually do.
Okay.
Right. And that's one of the reasons for that is food waste in a typical week tends to happen. It's like a death by 1,000 cuts. It's a little bit here, a little bit there, there's a half a plate of mashed potatoes and vegetables, right? I'll just scrape that into the compost bin, right? It's small amounts, but they accumulate over the year. Okay.
Over the year.
Yeah, that's right. So we're thinking about a particular issue that a bit here and a bit there starts to accumulate into a really large problem, right? 2.5 million tons for Australian householders. Okay. And that is literally massive. A bit here and a bit there. Exactly right.
Yeah. And it's across millions of households as
well.
That's
the other thing too.
It's not just you who's scraping that potato into the bin.
Exactly right. So we don't really know the scale of the problem, and we don't really know, or aren't as, we think we do a lot better than we actually do. Okay. That's the thing. The other point is this habituated nature of food, right? That we just are so automatic when it comes to shopping and cooking and eating. We don't often stop to challenge the way that we're doing it. Okay. So it's there's so many other, healthy diets and, alcohol and all these sort of things that they've become such habits that we don't even think about them. And it's a matter of shifting some of those. And I guess one of the third sort of underlying issues, which we can't do much about, is that food is quite cheap generally. So, it doesn't hurt us when we waste it, right? It's interesting. We don't tend to waste meat, right? And one of the reasons we don't tend to waste meat is because it's much more expensive than fruit and vegetables are, or say cereals and other products are. So high quality food items we don't tend to waste. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an underlying issue, I guess, which, and I guess the fourth one is, for a lot of us, we know we shouldn't do it, but we don't really have much of a sense as to what we can do to stop it. And that's why research like what Ozharvest have, just worked with me on is really useful, because essentially we give people a playbook how to reduce food waste in your home by giving them a whole list of behaviors that have had good evidence behind them, that if you do these, you're going to reduce how much you waste.
Yeah. And that brings us back to the three most accessible behaviors that we spoke about a few minutes ago.
Exactly right.
That people can start to implement. Okay. Well, that's interesting, because I honestly did think that it was perhaps that food waste, and my initial thoughts were that it was a massive result of just a lack of awareness of how bad it is. But like you said, no one sits down and says, oh, food waste, that's fine, it's not an issue. We all know it's an issue, but those elements that you just mentioned about how we don't know how we can change it, or food's so cheap that we know that we can buy more for those cheaper items anyway. And those are actually leading to us wasting more food. And the whole idea that it is that small bit, it doesn't seem bad. And I know humans are notoriously bad at visualizing the bigger picture and seeing down the track. It's all about what's in front of me. So that half plate does seem like nothing, but when millions of households are doing it, and doing it every day, it's a massive issue.
It builds up. And look, there is a lack of awareness, right? But it's more of a lack of awareness of how much food you waste as an individual, or how much food your household wastes, right? There's total awareness about food waste is crap, we shouldn't do it, right? It has bad consequences. The lack of awareness comes down to when the lack of awareness is there when it comes down to us and our specific lives. We're not aware about how much food we actually waste, and we tend to think we do much better than we actually do.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yep.
And is there a way, I guess this is probably a harder way to approach the issue of food waste, but are there any initiatives or strategies in play that are trying to get people to realize how much food they're wasting?
Yeah, and look, one of the 36 behaviors that we identified with AusHarvest is actually for people to do a waste audit of themselves, of their households, and to set some goals based on that, right? The reason we didn't put it up at the top 3 behaviors was for the way that you reacted when I said waste audit, right? There's an ickiness factor there.
There is, absolutely.
There's also a bit of a, oh my God, I've got to now think about how do I audit my food waste? Wouldn't that potentially be a bit disgusting? That's maybe a little bit effortful. So it's in terms of a quality behavior, it's right up there. It didn't make our list of 3 because at least there's a perception it's not an easy behavior. It takes a bit of, it takes a bit to get, to warm up to this idea, right? But a waste audit can also be quite simple, right? So essentially it could just be when, you have a little notepad in your kitchen in which you've got a table where you've got some of the common kind of food items written on the top of each column. And then whenever you throw out that bit, you just tick it on the notepad, right? And you do that for a week just to get a sense from that how much food you wasted over a week. So essentially it's like keeping a bit of a kitchen diary as to how much food you're wasting. I'm not saying, look, the proper way to do it is to jump in your bin and have a rummage around, right? But that's going to be out of most people's kind of comfort zone.
I think so.
The less kind of icky way of doing it is even do it on your phone, right? Is have a little notepad on your phone and you've just note down whenever you've thrown something out for the space of a week. And at the end of the week, have a look. What are you throwing out most frequently? How much of that is what you're throwing out? And then based on those, what goals can you set to reduce particular items that you're finding you're wasting a lot of?
Okay. And I guess for anyone out there who does decide to do a food audit via their phone, and they come to the end of the week and they see that maybe the most wasted food is bread, for example. They don't have to stop wasting everything at the end of that week, but they can just focus on bread and say, okay, this week I'm going to tackle bread. I'm not going to waste as much bread.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And then it's small incremental changes we can make. And I guess then by 2030, which is that's the big year, that's the buzzword. Yes. We can halve our food waste.
Yeah, and certainly, we can play our part in halving that. And again, as we've talked about a few times, when you throw out that third of bit of bread that's gone stale in your pantry, in and of itself, that looks really tiny. But as you said, multiply it across millions, and you're starting to get quite a substantial issue here. So it is the food waste, it is those small actions that we do every day, which accumulates. And actually then, if we try to tackle those, we'll go to halving food waste by 2030.
Okay, yeah. So it's all about tackling those smaller, it doesn't have to be a massive step into being zero food waste overnight. We can slowly tackle the smaller issues like the bread and then the tomatoes and then the rest.
Look, and for those that don't want to do a waste audit, for those that don't want to keep a kitchen diary, that's absolutely fine. Just stick with the 3 steps that AusHarvest and I recommended and start from there, because we do know that in general, those are really effective in reducing food waste.
Yeah, definitely.
AusHarvest is plotting at some stage of developing some online tools to help people do a non-icky waste audit of their food.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the technical term right there. Oh, non-icky.
The non-icky
food waste
audit.
Exactly. But I'm not sure when that's coming down the line. So, it could just be something on your phone, or even just a notepad and pen to kind of do a more lo-fi version until they come up with theirs.
Definitely. Well, that's all very exciting. I'd love to see the non-icky food waste audit sometime in the future. But for now, I think the three big behaviors are a great way that people can walk away from this documentary. I know I'll be implementing them, and so will the rest of the team, now that we have three behaviors that we can change. And I know I went over them before, but just to go over them one more time, that first one was to cook once a week with your leftover ingredients and your leftover meals. The second one was to put all those leftover ingredients and meals into a certain section of your fridge where you're going to see it every day, or pantry. And then the third one was to think about who's home before you cook and cook accordingly.
Yep, spot on. And OzHarvest have actually developed a little tape that you can order for free on their website. It's called the Use It Up tape. And that actually allows you to tape off that little section of the fridge. So you've already can make your own Use It Up space in there as well. It's yellow. Awesome. It's yellow and black, and it looks a little bit like the police tape that they put off around a crime scene, right? Which I really like as well. But it's a really nice little visual kind of aid to help you out that they've developed.
Definitely, yeah, and something fun that you can do with your housemates or do in your family, depending on your living situation. Just have that little section and start to hold each other accountable.
Spot on.
Definitely. All right. Well, Mark, that covers pretty much everything that everything we wanted to get out of you. So thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure,
I've had heaps of fun, and I'm glad every time I talk to someone in this area, I'm learning more, and it just inspires me to do more for my own food waste. And I'm hoping that it really inspires all the viewers and everyone out there who gets a chance to look at this documentary. So thank you very much for your time.
No worries. An absolute pleasure, Owen. Thanks for having me.